Hello and welcome to the Key Point episode 4. This week I have in the studio Mr. Emmanuel Agbonowosi. He's a researcher in internet governance and tech policy, and he will be having a conversation with us to give us more insight, to share his experiences with us, and also teach us some of the things we didn't know about the use of the internet. Now, talking about the topic internet governance and policy, it goes much more into how the internet is used, the rules and the regulations, the standards and all that, but he's an expert on the field, so he's going to give us more insight on that. So without wasting much time, I want to first start with the basics. When we say internet governance and policy, we would want to understand what it means. So if you can just give us a little bit of explanation.
Okay, thank you very much. So when we talk about internet governance, it refers to the norms, the regulations, the applications that are actually put in place by internet governance bodies to make the internet work. So when you talk about internet governance bodies or internet governance in general, it's a multi-stakeholder governance. So you have stakeholders from the academia, stakeholders from the technical community, you have the stakeholders from the private sector, the business community, and also the internet users. So all those people in their different roles actually bring their expectations to the table to set up a particular policy.
Well, someone will ask that, imagine I'm a business person and then maybe internet is the field in which I work. Does that make me a stakeholder as well in terms of how the governance is done?
Yeah, the internet today being a global network, everybody is a stakeholder. Okay. No matter where you are on earth, either you are an end user, you are a government, okay, or you are from the academia or the technical community. Okay. Even as a journalist, you have a voice. Okay. We can add you to the civil society organizations. So yes, everybody is a stakeholder when it comes to internet governance.
All right. Now, I would want us to delve a bit much more into the conversation in the sense that we know in everyday life we use internet. So we want to look at how governing that internet and the policy that is associated with it, how it impacts the consumers, the businesses, and the innovation, talking about the digital space. What are some of the impact the internet governance and policy can have on those people?
Yes, as I said, every stakeholder that comes to the table when it comes to internet governance have its expectations, have its own regulations that he's expecting. So how does it affect people? If you take the government play a role of governing the internet, okay, the safety of the people, the integrity of the territory. Okay. All those things are the concerns of the government. Okay. The private sector, which are the telcos, for example, like the internet service providers, the telecommunication organizations, when they come, they talk business. Okay. They want to sell their service, they want to sell their product to people. And when it comes to the consumers, they need the service and they want access. They want an affordable access. If you take the academia will be looking at how do we actually develop norms so that the internet does not harm us instead of actually bringing us good. Okay. So every stakeholder at every level has a role to play, and that role combined affects our economies. Let me give you a very basic example. Okay. For example, if you take in countries, for example, the business community or the telcos, they don't go to rural areas. Why? The reason is very simple. Because there's no return on investment from there. But the government, in its role to provide service to all citizens, must oblige them to go and provide service there. Yeah. Then we need, to come to a common understanding on how can we do that. Okay. Then the government will say, okay, I'll contribute in building the infrastructure, okay, or I will bring a subsidy to services in those communities. Okay. So that's how it affects everybody at every level. You actually
tapped into my next question, because we know not everyone uses internet, like you said, in a rural area. So the unequal access to the internet, how does it impact the people, or in general, or even the socio-economic life of the people?
Yes, so I think in today's life, I think 10 years ago, when we're speaking about internet, it was a luxury.
Yeah.
And
even now, it is still a luxury, maybe not
for some people. But in our daily life, imagine you don't have WhatsApp for a whole day. or you don't have internet connectivity for a whole day, how you feel. Because it affects every aspect of our life today.
Sure.
Even to drive your car, you need a GPS. Even to go and buy something, you need, to order for a car. All those things affect us. But people living in rural communities, that is the only gateway to the rest of the world. Because information doesn't get through them without internet.
Sure.
Today we are in a globally connected world. In the past, people used to write letters, go to the post office.
And all
But
that.
today, you can have a video call, no matter where you are. In some countries, it's still a luxury in some of the countries, especially, in our countries, it's still a luxury for rural communities. But even in urban areas, we still have problem of quality of service, because the quality of service we enjoy, for example, in capital cities is not the same sometimes, even if you go just 30 kilometers from the capital. So yeah, it affects our life, because the farmer who is like very far away from the capital city need to be connected to know what is going on the markets, the prices, all those kind of things. He needs to be connected. So we become a globally, connected world, that everybody today need that particular access to live, either for health, either for economy, either for everything. You need that connectivity.
I think even talking about the rural aspect, I think there was an initiative in a particular country where they were expected to use drones to deliver medicines and then some other aids to some particular areas. But I'm sure the drone uses GPS, which also need access to the internet. So it is, very important. But I want us to go a bit more specific into how the unequal access impacts people. You, as a researcher, for example, how does not having a particular area, not having access to internet, how does it impact your work as a researcher?
Yes, so we call something the last mile.
Okay.
The last mile is the last kilometer where the internet have to get to.
Okay.
And the last miles usually are the rural communities. And those rural communities in most African countries, I'm giving that example because when it comes to the global south, either Africa, Asia, or Southern America, those communities are not connected. So we have an initiative that they call the Universal Service Fund. Okay. The Universal Service Fund in some countries, for example, is more than 2% of the telcos, how do you call it? The
Revenue.
Income of the telcos. Okay. So they have to pay that 2% to the regulator. Okay. In some countries, an independent service. Okay. So that service now will look at the rural communities and see how can we use that fund, for example, to build an infrastructure a telco doesn't want to build, or to bring the connectivity or the digital literacy and all those kind of initiatives that can actually get those people connected. So as a researcher, it does affect me as every citizen, because if you have people in rural communities and you need data, you don't get that data until you drive to that location. So, it does affect everybody at every aspect, even the government, because to be able to govern people, you need data. And I think we'll delve into that, in the conversation.
Your conversations are much more leading into my questions, which makes it easier for me, because somebody will be worried about those who have the policies or those who govern the internet. So I want us to look at maybe the historical and at the same time the geopolitical factors that constitute the landscape of the internet governance bodies, the people who, do that.
So when you look at the ecosystem today is, as I said, is a global ecosystem. So everybody at every particular level plays a role. Today you have institutions like ICANN that govern everything that comes to naming, norming. We're using like domain name systems, our telephone numbers, who assign it to us. For example, if you go and see a telco and take a telephone number, who assign it to you? How does it work? So we do have those organizations like ICANN, for example, who develop policies when it comes to the domain name, systems, when it comes to numbers. So at the regional level, at every region, like Africa, for example, we have institutions who have that privilege of assigning those names, of assigning those, numbers to the countries, to the telcos. So in Africa, for example, we have Afrinic. In Asia Pacific, we have APNIC. In North America, we have ARIN. So ICANN will now play the role of a mother. That will assign the numbers to the regional level. The regional level will assign to the regulators. Regulators will assign to the telcos. So that's how it works. For example, giving a basic example of a basic example of ICANN. We do have people who work on the standard. The standard development, for example, we have like the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union. We have the ITF. We have ISOC. They work on the norms, on the standards when it comes to the internet. We do have, the users, the end users. The end users, you ask me, how did they contribute to, how did they contribute to the internet ecosystem? Today, for example, all those institutions I just mentioned, either ICANN, ITU, or ISOC, they are open to everybody. Every end user on this earth can be a member. So when there's a particular policy, for example, every year we look at what are the most important topics on the evolution of the technology. So that those topics, we'll look at it, how do we develop, a policy around it. So for example, let me give you a basic example. Right now, when it comes to the ecosystem, we are actually discussing the internet fragmentation, we are discussing AI and its evolution, we are discussing, meaningful access. So those three topics, for example, every year we have what we call the Internet Governance Forum. So that forum was created by the United Nations. So every year we gather in a particular country, like last year was in Japan. We
have to get updated.
Where all the stakeholders comes. Either it's the media, either it's end user, either academia. Everybody comes. We have like 8,000 people, for example, gathering in Japan this year to discuss the future of the internet. So everybody bring his concern. We have like 300 workshops going on, where everybody bring his recommendations to the table and say that regarding fragmentation, that's what we think. Regarding AI, that's what we think. Regarding meaningful access, that's what we think. Because we don't have the same definition for things, depending on where you are coming from in the world. Because somebody, for example, coming from Europe or coming from North America, access is not a problem for him. His problem is his right online. In Africa,
quality of the service.
The quality of the service. In Africa, we are still fighting for access. Then when we have the access, we think about what regulation will guide that particular usage of it. Then the government play a role as well as a stakeholder. Government, for example, play a role at the local level. Because ICANN can say, for example, yes, I'm assigning this country top level domain name to Togo, which is .tg. I'm assigning to Togo, or I'm assigning the .gh to Ghana. Ghana has the right to work with his local stakeholders to see how they can keep that CCTLD working in terms of pricing, in terms of assigning, and all those kind of things. It becomes now in the territory of the government and the local stakeholders.
But let me quickly chip in. Sometimes when we are doing applications online, they say you should put postal code, zip code. Sometimes there's always that confusion in terms of which one is the correct one, because you spoke something about maybe .gh or .tg, which, I've seen on most websites when it comes to the national level for some countries, I do see that. But talking about the postal code and then the zip code, can you, if you have any knowledge around there, can you enlighten us about how that works?
In the physical world, we have the postal code. And that used to govern the world from, I don't know, from which age till the early 90s, even today. Where, for example, you send a letter, that letter will leave the US, find its way to get you to Nairobi or in Accra or in Togo. So that was the system that the International Telecommunication Union put in place to make sure that every message that is actually assigned to somebody, that message to go to the hand of that person. So when the internet arrived in the early 90s, we have to find the same way of working. Your mail, for example, can be newworldtv.tg. So maybe it's Emmanuel at newworld.tg. If I send you an email, that email should pass through what we call that same route.
But so not in the physical world.
Yes. So it's applied at this physical world, because that message that is sent from your computer will leave your IP address, will connect to what we call a root server.
Okay.
So the IP address is managed by, maybe, okay, .tg, let me go that way. .tg managed by a regulator, for example, in Togo.
Okay.
He gets that message. That message, for example, go to what we call the internet exchange points, which most countries have. So he routes to that, route. He goes there. He will, the same message will live there. Go to, how do you call it? The ICANN root service. And those root servers are like DHL. When they get the message, now they look who is this message assigned to. So they should be able, the computers among themselves speak to each other. That's why every device that you carry, either it's a phone, it's a smartwatch, it's a TV, it has what we call an IP address. The IP address is a physical address of that device. So no matter where you are on earth with that device, the message will get to you. So yes, we try to actually replicate the physical world into
the internet or the internet
world.
I mean, I'm getting to know new things about the use of the internet. I would have liked us to go into the privacy and all that, but we are basing on internet governance today, so we'll go quickly. So viewers, we are on the key point for this episode this week. You can watch us on Facebook, the Key Point with double I, and on YouTube is a Key Point playlist on New World TV. You can watch us also every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Catch a repeat same time on Sundays. We'll be going for a quick break. We'll be right back. So welcome back to the topic for today, internet governance and policy. And I have here in the studios a researcher into internet governance and tech policy, Mr. Emmanuel Agbe-Nowosi. He has been giving us a lot of information and a lot of insight. Now we'll be moving into another question which is important because you made me understand that each person that uses the internet is a stakeholder. So in one way or the other, that person also constitutes a governing body. So my specific question is that what reforms or changes could improve the effectiveness and the inclusivity of these governance structures? As for the inclusivity, I mean, you spoke earlier, they even invite media journalists, invite stakeholders and all that to be part of it. So I think the inclusivity part is already taken care of. But how does the reforms and the changes that they make, how can it improve the effectiveness of the governing structures?
Yes. Today, the governing structures, being multi-stakeholder governing structures, make it more easier because I said it earlier, we don't speak the same language when it comes to connectivity, for example, or when it comes to internet governance, for example. So I think from my experience so far, I mean, I've joined the ICANN. I've joined ICANN, for example, for the last 8 years. And during that 8 years, I've observed something that is interesting. Every working group, you have somebody from a particular region of the world, either from the global south, from Europe, from the US. Because we don't speak the same language, we come to what we call a consensus to a topic. And I want to give a basic example because anytime we're talking about governance, it looks more technical. So I usually give examples. And the basic example is, it comes to, we had this conversation, if the .amazon domain name, should we give it to the business Amazon.com, which is a business that everybody knows, or should we give it to the Amazon region, which is Brazil, which is a region, indigenous communities. So those indigenous communities are saying that this is our identity, and we want to be identified online as the Amazon region.
But to be, I'm glad you brought this point because, to be honest as well, nothing sold on Amazon actually represents the region Amazon.
Yes.
But it is actually a name too. So I think anybody who feels their ideology matches with the name will probably go for it.
Yes, and because it become identification, as you said, the business say, okay, now that everybody knows us, we prefer, for example, getting the domain name so that for our shoes, we put shoes.amazon. For microphone, we put microphone.amazon. So it helps, our search engine optimization. The Amazon region also is saying that this is not a business tool. We are indigenous community. This is our identity.
Exactly.
So when it comes to conversations like that, we work on what we call policy development process. It can take 5 years.
Yeah,
so it's constituted of people from different background, different region, So we have to work on that particular question. So every year, for example, we meet 3 times in a year in a different region of the world, where we spend a whole full week discussing whether this should be assigned to this person or this should be assigned to that person. So those policies, for example, happen even at the national level. So in every country, we have what we call the National Internet Governance Forums. Those forums are not decision-making bodies, but those forums are actually bodies that put recommendations together relating to internet governance topics, which are hot topics in the country. They discuss it together. So you have the government on the table on equal footing with the civil society, on equal footing with the users, on equal footing with the private sector, the regulator. So we discuss on a particular topic. And for example, let me give you a basic example. In Togo, 2 years ago, we discussed the 5G. We discussed the 5G and the topic. Emerging technologies. And the question was, who are you giving the license to? How many telcos do we have in Togo? How many internet service providers do we have? What will be the cost of that license? So that the cheaper the license is, the cheaper the price of the connectivity. Sure. So we discuss and come to 30 recommendations that were sent to the government, that were sent to the regulator, so they will look at it, and if they need, subject experts on the matter, then they come to you. Either you are Internet Society, local chapter, either you are an ICANN or whatever you are, they come to you from your expertise. Either a technical expertise, it can be an expertise from the academia, or you have conducted particular research as a university, for example, regarding 5G. They come to you, get the knowledge from you, it helps them in their decision making.
So there's a lot of things going behind us before
yes.
we actually have access to the internet, with all the difficulties per se. But now speaking about, we've already touched on the effectiveness and the inclusivity, but there's one key thing, equal representation. Because you spoke about the various stakeholders that come in, but we don't know the percentage of who comes in, because if the higher percentage is the telcos, the business owners, the government, and the end users are not really much inside, there will be an imbalance. And at the same time, too, the fair decision making. Because we know in certain international organizations, people have the veto power. People also do much of the contribution in terms of finance, so they have the higher say in terms of these things. So in terms of equal representation and fair decision making in these governance bodies, what approaches could be used to give equal representation and fair decision making?
Yeah, that's what they call it, the multi-stakeholderism. Does it really work? It's a question that we're still asking. Because when you look at the internet governance today, I can say with assurance that the representation is there. The representation is there because when you look at the people on the table, it's not because the person, in the past, it used to be the U.S. The U.S. government used to own the internet. And we had the IANA transition recently where we said the internet should no more be under the leadership of the U.S. government. The internet should be a globally owned, asset.
Yeah.
And today we can say with assurance that everybody, because if you take ICANN, if you take ISOC, if you take all those institutions today, they are no more under the U.S. government leadership. If you take them, most of them have their HQ in the U.S. though. But yes, gradually, you will notice that it is moving because the U.S. government does not have a say into it. You have somebody in Liberia contributing to a working group within ICANN. Myself, I work in a particular working group. We call it International Domain Name, systems. And those internationalized domain names, which we call IDNs, for example, is to be able to have our local languages online.
Yeah.
For example, if this television is called newworldtv.com, we should have the same, a string in a local language. Today we don't have. We should have it in Arabic. We should have it in French. We should have it in English. We should have it in every language. Language shouldn't be a barrier for example, not getting a domain name. So I do a contribution into that working group, 90 minutes of my week every week. And I have colleagues from all over the world. We gather every week and working on that policy. And by next year, that policy will be in place.
Okay.
That's the moment you notice that, okay, my little contribution I brought to the table is governing the global internet. So yes, I can say it with assurance that we have that representation. If I take the vice president of ICANN, the technical vice president of ICANN is a Togolese.
Wow.
Adela Klogan is a Togolese. We do have people in those governing bodies, and there's equal representation because, as I said, they have representation from every region. Every region is equally represented. So everybody comes with his challenges from his country.
That is what is going to come now, because you spoke earlier about when the little contribution each and every stakeholder do, maybe in a year or 2 or in 5 years, some of them are implemented, maybe reframed into policies and changes and all that. But I know definitely, you said yourself, you don't speak the same language, so definitely there will be challenges. So what are some of the regulatory challenges in terms of getting the regulations that come, especially with the advancement of technology, the involvement of AI and all those things? What challenges do you face when it comes to the internet governance policy?
Yeah, the challenges are a lot, especially when you come to the African continent.
Okay.
In the African continent, we don't speak with one voice,
Sure.
which is one of the biggest problems when it comes to internet regulation. Let me give you a basic example. If you go to the European Union, they speak at 27 countries.
Yeah, exactly.
So the IGPD, for example, regarding the personal data, for example, when it comes into force, the whole world has changed when it comes to personal data because there are 27 speaking the same language. When it comes to Africa, for example, we have the same convention. We call it the Malabo Convention. The Malabo Convention, African countries need to ratify it, and most governments don't want to ratify it. So once we don't speak the same language, it becomes very difficult because we move in silos. We move in silos. Every government having a regulation. The next government is having the opposite regulation. And we copy bad, regulation from each other. I have countries, for example, when there's election, they shut down the internet. We don't have other countries, when there's exam, they shut down the internet. Because others have done it, they went to learn it. And the bad thing is, when it comes to the continent, we always learn the bad examples. We don't take the good examples. Today we are talking about taxation. We don't have access, but people want to tax the internet. That's another big challenge. In the US, in Europe, for example, it's easy for them to tax it. If you go to other countries like China, because that's another conversation, they have their own way of taxing whatever they are doing. Because of what? Because they are producing for their people. Imagine, for example, if a government in Africa, Burundi, for example, will say, okay, today I'm going to tax Google. And Google say, okay, you know what? I'm
taking my service away.
So imagine what will happen.
Yeah, it shouldn't be on an individual
as a continent today, we don't have a social media, we don't have a search engine, we have nothing. So it's become more difficult. So we still be consumers to, those kind of, how do you call it? So when it comes to, it depends also at the level of democracy in countries. Sure. Because now internet matches with democracy. In the past, you can go to a TV station or a radio station, you speak, you go out, the military is waiting for you, then you know what you are expecting. But today with the internet, everybody can say everything he wants to say online. In other countries, they can be able to identify you because people have addresses.
Exactly.
The government know where you live. In our countries, the person who say it, you will not find him. So
it would have been very, very insightful to actually have this same topic, but touching more on the privacy and then the regulations aspect. Probably, I'm hoping next time we would be able to touch on that because it's very important. Having access doesn't also guarantee that we should be behind our internet and just be saying anything we want as well. But we shouldn't also be censored because of what we say. Actually, I think that's one of the fight Elon Musk has been doing with the introduction of the X from Twitter. Now let's dive, because we are still talking about AI. I'm actually waiting for the AI aspect. Yes. There are a lot of AI tools now that are generating things beyond human imagination. What are some of the challenges finding regulations based on how, the internet is used in line with AI?
For us, what is AI? AI is data. Because AI cannot function without data. The challenges we are having in developing economies are completely different from the challenges people in developed countries are having. Why? Because they have data. We are still collecting data. And how do we collect the data? Determine the challenges we have. We still we still gather data with paper. We still, don't have data about our citizens.
We trust the physical one.
We still don't have data about our citizens. But machine decision can only based on data that is in the computer. So it's becoming more challenging. That's why you see that most countries, if you look at most countries like Senegal, they have their vision 2030. We have Togo, the Togo Digital 2025. If you read those particular, documents, you notice that every government today is going through the, data. They are setting up policies, they are setting up laws, they are setting up frameworks around data gathering, around data protection. They are even thinking about EID for their citizens. But in Europe, everybody has an ID. In terms of EID,
we don't have places, people just walk through, they don't even swipe their cards anymore.
Without that, it's very difficult for us, for example, to talk about, governance of AI. Because the kind of data that we even have online today doesn't belong to us. Is Google, is Facebook, is Amazon, is all the gathering our data. And those data are stocked where? Because that's the question too. Those data are stocked somewhere in the US. So making it very difficult for our government, for example, to take a particular decision.
I actually had a former ambassador and some other tech experts on data governance and policy, I think a couple of weeks ago, and they presented some of the challenges we are presenting because what we actually have that we can use is not even ours.
Yes.
Because we haven't gathered it. So when it happens that we are cut off that information, it means it will be very difficult. So now we're going to move on to the policymakers, the ethical use and the responsible use of data governance, internet governance and the policies, because no matter how free we want it to be, no matter the equal access, the quality of service, no matter how the benefits, the pros and cons, there has to be an ethical aspect of it, where we abide by the laws, the regulations, and even we ourselves that imagine we are not abided by the laws, how responsible can we be in terms of internet governance and policy?
Yeah, when it comes to responsibility, we have a shared responsibility.
Okay.
In the early days of the internet, we do have what we call the net etiquette. Okay. The net etiquette is the same as dining etiquette, for example. To sit on the table, do this, do this, do this.
Position things at the proper place.
But with the evolution of the internet today and the level of digital literacy, it becomes more and more difficult because somebody who, is illiterate, if you give him the phone, he can say everything he wants to say, do everything he wants to do. Yes, because he doesn't know about it. That ignorance. But somebody who is, has that digital literacy, if you give him a phone, his behavior towards it is also completely different. So we have that shared responsibility because even for government today in Africa, they have to go the drastic way. They have to go the most difficult way in regulating those things because we don't have that level of digital literacy. It's difficult for people, for example, to understand that this thing I cannot say offline, I shouldn't be saying it online. Because we live in a world that those things circulate very easily.
Viral videos are what we like to watch the most.
And today we don't have the laws and regulations. So usually, for example, if you take defamation, in other countries of the world, defamation online and defamation offline are not actually governed by the same law. So the cyber laws, and countries in Africa who have tried to go through those cyber laws are so harsh. They are so harsh because we don't live in democracies in most African countries. So for the government, the moment I cannot control what the citizens are saying about me, I should put a regulation there that will prevent and give that self-censorship to the people so that they shouldn't even say it. So all have to do with the level of democracy that we have, the kind of laws and regulation that we put in place. They should be progressive laws. And those laws must be multi-stakeholder laws. In other countries, for example, if they are voting cybercrime law, for example, they are doing a reading this week in Nigeria, what will happen is civil society will send a memorandum and saying that this article, and this article, this is what we think. The business community will say that this is what we think. The academia will say that this is what we think. And the government will also say that is what I think. Before the parliamentarians should be able to vote or not that particular law. But in most African countries, you just on your television one morning and you hear that Togo has voted, or Ghana, or whatever country has voted a cyber law.
It's very true.
So those laws are not progressive because they are not, stakeholder laws, and also they don't have that human right-based approach when they are developing it. They develop usually the laws towards a particular project or towards a particular ambition, but it doesn't actually get, the input of the entire ecosystem, which make it very difficult.
Well, time will not allow us to go much further, so I want to take your last words on internet policy and internet governance and policy. What are your last words for our viewers?
Well, I think I always speak for developing countries, yes, because I come from a developing countries. What we should do is to participate, because participation is key. And knowledge, I think, is power. Usually, we think that all those regulations that comes to us are defined by somebody. No. We have that capability, we have now that possibility to contribute. So no matter where you live today, you can actually join either an Internet Society chapter, you can join ICANN through its fellowship programs, you can join the ITF, you can join all the internet governance bodies, because since, 5 to 10 years ago, the UN has made sure that we have that platform, which is a platform that we have at every country. For example, we're trying to set up that internet governance forum where people can speak, bring their conversation to the table. At the regional level, if you feel like in your country you don't have that opportunity, we still have the regional, School of Internet Governance, where you can train yourself on how to develop policies, for example, or how to participate. We still have those regional, internet governance forums. And we have the Global Internet Governance Forum, where people can participate and bring their voices to the table. So I invite everybody, no matter where you are, no matter which sector, no matter which stakeholder group you belong to join, the conversation, bring your expertise to the table, bring your challenges, because sometimes you don't have expertise, but you have challenges. Bring the challenges to the table, and I think we can have a more secure, a more trustworthy, network, and a more open, internet for all.
Thank you very much. So I had Mr. Emmanuel Agbenowosi, who is an internet governance and tech policy researcher. He is the newly elected board chair of the Internet Society, the Togo chapter. Thank you for honoring this invitation and also giving us very insightful conversations and knowledgeable things that we would learn today. My viewers and I are equally grateful for your submission. I'm hoping we'll have you next time. We'll look at more of the data privacy and other aspects of the internet governance and policy. So viewers, we've come to the end of this episode on The Key Point. You can watch us every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Catch and repeat same time on Sundays. And on Facebook is The Key Point with double I on The Key Point. And on YouTube is the New World TV, The Key Point playlist. See you next week. It's a vibe.